Hi, welcome to Intuitive Insights. I am your host, Meghan McDonough. I am an intuitive guide and a creativity coach. And today I have a special guest. I have with me Camilla Fontaine, who is a fellow artist. And I'm going to have you, Camilla, introduce yourself. Would you like to do that?
Okay, I would love to do that. Hello, I'm Camilla Fontaine. I am an actor meets photographer meets educator. I've spent a long time bringing those worlds together, and I'm still always investigating those worlds of photography, education, and acting. And I make stuff there.
I love it. Yeah. Camilla and I know each other from a group. It's kind of, I actually call it like akin to like a happening. You know, the happenings in the 60s?
No, what? I'm sorry.
In the 60s, they had a thing called like happenings. You didn't learn about this in college?
No, maybe I should. I don't know.
So I too am an actor and went to school for it. And one of the things we learned about was a thing called happenings that were in the 60s. And what they were was like you would go to a home or a venue or whatever, just like you'd get an invite. And you just show up and people would make art. Whatever the element was, you'd either come with something and like, this is my understanding of it. You would come with either music or, painting or acting, whatever, maybe art, theater. And it was just like you'd come together and see what happened. It's kind of like a drum circle with for artists.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That sounds amazing. We need to
I know, but that's kind of akin to what we do for actors. It's like a group where we come together, and I also call it like an actor's gym. Like we show up, we get, I want to say naked, but not literally, we're figuratively naked with, we get vulnerable and we explore and we take risks and we play and support each other. And it's a beautiful space. And that's how we met.
Yes.
At Red Orchid Theater. So I'm going to ask you my 2 questions, and then we're going to see where we go from there.
Okay.
Okay. The first is, how would you define intuition?
How would I define intuition? That's a good question, because I think first about my guts.
Yeah.
And I go, especially for me, to my solar plexus. And intuition to me is the feeling of either expansion or retraction in my solar plexus. That's how
That's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. Thanks.
I love that visual, because I always say that it's true intuition is that which connects, which would be expanding, reaching out, right? And then fear is that which contracts, which is coming away from something and, disconnect. Right? You know what I mean?
Right.
So, yeah.
It's interesting to me how both of those things, though, for me, like in my journey in my life, I think my intuition began with fear, actually. It began with the retraction and like coming to know that feeling and coming to be intimate with the physical feeling of that in my body and coming to really actually start to listen to my body in order to even have a sensation of when it began to expand. And so like intuition is kind of like, the quiet knowings of, hey, listen to this, that you can't really explain, that is more of a body sensation. Yeah. Connected to, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I call it the soul's voice. It's like we have the energetic side of ourself that's permanent, and then the physical part of ourself that's impermanent. And the mind and fear activate and try and protect the impermanence of our physical shell, right? Because it's transient. So it needs protection. Whereas the soul is, everlasting. And so it doesn't have things like fear. Doesn't have things like, right? Well,
I don't know.
Tell me, yeah.
Okay. So
let's get into it.
I'm going to talk some acting talk really fast because
let's do it.
So I'm trained in this methodology of theater making called soul work.
Yeah.
It's a methodology of embodied studio practice and creation that's rooted in African American performance and oral traditions, created by Dr. Crystal Chanel Truscott. And it's a way of merging and synthesizing kind of just like global perspective and activism with creative impulse. And part of that study and that research, I feel like, for me, it always feels like research when I go into the studio, is something called emotional availability, which is like being really closely tied to especially fear, anger, joy, and sadness, rooted in the body, and allowing for freedom to pass between each of those emotions as it's anchored in the body, as also something called call and response. So I say all of this to be like my study of soul, and how soul travels through the body as an actor, and what is able to like actually access its freedom fully, and to be like, to allow it to also be physicalized and put into our work as actors. It means that you have to have freedom even in things like fear. Soul is passing through fear and does access fear and has
100%.
Speak to it.
Yes, I mean, I think we're saying the same thing in a different context. Like soul is and yes, I like the way you're using the word flow, because it is more, I see it like Shiva Shakti. It is that kind of Shakti fluid energetics. That's how it moves. Soul is free to flow, right? Whereas the more sounds so woo-woo, but like the more earthly, tangible things like fear, which is, part of the human experience, right? Anger, all those emotions, they're transient though. Meaning they change. Right. So, but the ability to change is allowing that flow of the soul.
Totally.
So even if you don't allow that flow of the soul, what you get is stuck. You get, it's just like the life force doesn't flow there anymore. So then creativity starts to dwindle. Growth starts to diminish, right? Expression, it becomes hidden, or one tracked, right? I feel like we're saying the same things. Maybe we're not, in different ways.
Yeah, maybe we are saying the same things in different ways. I guess what I'm curious about, is the role that fear plays.
I find fear is fuel.
Really?
Fear is, for me, and yes, let's get into this one because this is one of my favorite topics. Fear is two things. It's, a couple of things. It's a guardrail, it's a directional, and it's fuel. And if it is none of those, it's a block. So it's like fear comes to show us either where to go or where not to go, right? Sometimes as artists, I feel like it's telling us where to go. Yeah. In the physical body, sometimes I feel like it's don't go there, like don't walk into the fire. Not a great idea, unless you want to die. And then when you, as an artist, when you recognize the fear is saying, come here, explore this, then you can either use it as fuel and say, damn it, yeah, put that fear in your engine tank and then move forward, right? And just go, I don't know what I'm doing, but I got the fuel in my gas tank, or you can go, I'm scared, and stay still. Right. And then it becomes a block. Now now your turn.
I so agree with that. There's like a phrase that's like fear is an indicator. I don't know who said it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like fear is an indicator oftentimes of which direction to actually investigate more. And I find that to be true. But at the same time, as you were talking, I'm like, what specifically? I'm like, like I think there have been times in my life where I've been really afraid, but I get that sensation of being stale, and I can't stand being stale.
Right.
And that actually, like, when I start, standing in one place for too long, then I just get frustrated, and then I just get angry, and then I maybe self-destruct a little bit.
Yeah.
And I guess all of that serves its purpose, but it always comes back to like, what's on the other side of fear, And of course, I mean, I think there's this other method that I'm trained in called PEM that has to do with emotion in the body as well. And there's a pattern for fear. And she's like, go into the fear pattern, but keep walking forward. And you get that experience in you of going into a fear pattern and being in complete fear, which everything in you is wanting to go backwards, but you're walking forward. And she stops us and she's like, that's courage.
Yes. I was just about to say that's courage. Yeah.
Right. And so, it's interesting though, because as I look, I'm like, kind of like, what's like I'm like, I could try to think of this in regards to like acting, but more so like, in life, like I'm facing some big kind of career shifts right now. And there's been a lot of fear and a lot of standing still and a lot of frustration, a lot of anger and a lot of like gnashing my teeth. And then there's this like little quiet thing that's kind of like, you can keep going forward, but the going forward really is stepping into like not knowing what's going to happen. And I guess maybe that's on the other side of fear. A lot of times for me, I think, is the not knowing and being able to exercise really being okay with not knowing and staying calm and still moving forward, even in the not knowing.
Yeah. The brain is the other thought I have or philosophy I have is that the brain is the ruler of the body, where the heart is the ruler of the soul. So the soul has the map, and the brain has to rationalize the journey. And so it's like your soul is saying, go forward. But your brain is like, but how are we going to do this? How does it work? And then I think the difficulty of being an artist, one of the things, because the things that are commonly hard for people who aren't artists, which are the things like listening to your intuition and having the courage to go forward, and adaptability, that need for flow to be coming through you, change, needing to create, right? Yeah. Not wanting to be stuck or stagnant. Yeah. Those things to other people may seem more daunting, but to us come easy. What seems more daunting to us is, how do I marry the outside and the inside? How do I marry that listening to my intuition and courage and making it make sense in the real world, so that they can flow together? Yeah. That's what I found to be the hardest part.
Yeah. I mean, for me, maybe I'm with a lot of the people on the outside of it, because I also have had like a hard time reckoning with being an artist. I've had a hard time accepting it until recently, honestly. And I think that part of the reason that I am an artist is so that the necessity of making art makes me face that thing again and again and again. And really it comes down to transformation.
Yes.
And finding oneself in a path that asks one to transform again and again and again. And kind of being like, oh my gosh. Yeah. Kind of like getting to a new place in that of like, but for why?
Yeah.
Like it is that thing of the heart, the soul, and the brain, and finding balance. And to me, I mean, I started thinking about the feminine and the masculine with that too. That's been a huge thing for me as well, is like, you can think one thing about what is feminine and another thing about what is masculine. You can think about what these things are. And that too is standing still. until you embody and allow things to be what they are and to be balanced and to become balanced. And then there's that fear, because in that place, transformation looks like, oh, I thought I was this.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm coming to understand who and what I really am.
Yeah.
And it's like there's that fear. And then the brain comes in and is like, well, you got to do this to be this. And then you got to do that to be that. And then you kind of like, it's just standing still until nothing makes sense. And then
you can't do anything but move forward. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You're saying that. And I was thinking of, do you know the law of gender? Do you know that universal law of gender?
What's the universal law of gender?
Well, in my rudimentary understanding, I believe it is along the lines of all things have gender. Just like the universal law of polarity, all things have a spectrum, right? So there is no good, there's no bad. There's just deviations of more or less, and the same with gender. In my understanding is that all things have, and this is something I thought. So, all right, let's talk about this. Let's get into it. When I was a kid, I remember thinking that masculine and feminine were not subject to biology. Meaning that, and this is why I came up with it, is because I have a lot of masculine energy in me. Do you know what I mean? But I also have feminine energy, but I was related to having more masculine energy, And my parents were like, I always joked around and would say, like, my dad was the mom and my mom was the dad. My mom had a lot of masculine energy, still does. And my dad had a lot more feminine energy, still does. So to me, I didn't understand like why everyone was so, rigid in the thinking that we don't own both masculine and feminine to different degrees. Like it's like, what's your combination? 80-20, 24, you know what I mean? Or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter what you're physically, but like, what's your gender combination that makes you uniquely you, right? Like, what's the percentage of what, or is it all balanced or whatever? Anyway, but now it's such a prevalent topic for many reasons, right? And the one thing that I found, and I don't mean this in any way to be, I believe everyone should be seen and heard and able to express their unique special spark, no matter how that looks, as long as it's unharmful to them or others, right?
Right.
But the focus on the labeling is what is upsetting to me, because I'm like, the label doesn't matter.
Right.
It's the diamond inside. Doesn't matter what fucking brand it is,
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's that is throughout time and throughout nature in general, that masculine feminine, ratio, devout of biology.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah. Wow, that's really cool to hear all that. And yeah, I relate, like growing up, I identified as male. Like I was a little boy until I was 13.
Oh,
and
really?
Totally. Yeah. If you were to ask, especially my siblings, they're like, yeah, Camilla was a boy. And I loved being a boy, but of course I grew up partially in Texas, and I'm Mormon. And so eventually, as I was getting older, it became hard for me to sit in the uncertainty of the world and how it was reacting and responding to my appearance, And so I had to shift. And what an interesting thing of like, I was like, all right, we were moving to Idaho, and I was like, all right, I'll be a girl now. I tried. Yeah. And it like, it is so interesting, like, quote unquote, trying to be a girl when I'd like lived just even as I was, like, and I didn't have the languaging for like, I identify as being a boy. It wasn't that. And actually at the same time, I never like denied it, you know, like I never was like, no, like my body, I was like, always like, yeah, I'm like a female body, but like, I'm a boy, you know, kind of thing. And so, yeah, all this to say, I like what you're saying about kind of the spark and that being what it is. And actually that really not having words. And I think that we need words for so many things now. And I remember I was in grad school recently and I was remembering things about growing up. And I had for many years been wrestling with being a woman and never really feeling like I could, like never really feeling like.
What does that mean to you? Like, what is being a woman? Like, how do you define that?
I know, right? I was in the question and I would ask people and they never knew how to answer it. They'd be like, well, it's whatever you want it to be. And I kind of was like,
which is also annoying an answer. Yeah.
I was like, the closest thing that I found that brought me comfort and brought me like satisfaction in an answer was actually, I have a small copy of the Tao that my grandma gave me. And in the back, there's commentary. And I can't remember for which chapter it was commenting on, but whoever was annotating was like, the female is one who receives something and with it creates. And I was like, yeah, that's me. I was like, okay.
Like, that's it.
I'm female. And that like really helped me come to terms with like, okay, that thing of receiving and creating. And I still do, like, it's interesting. I have a really intimate connection with what I, in my body and in my heart and in my soul, deem to be female and deem to be male. And it has to do with my ancestry, and it has to do with like I have these two little objects that I carry around with me all the time.
What's this guy?
So my grandfather, who passed this last year, was a sculptor. And this is the smallest.
He was a sculptor?
Yes. Edward J. Ferratin.
Ooh.
Yeah. He made monuments.
That's beautiful. What is that? Is a man?
It's a man in a hoop.
Inside a hoop. Oh.
Inside a hoop. And
is he smoking?
Is he smoking?
Yeah. It looks like there's like a cigarette hanging as well. I can't tell. It
might be his nose.
Oh, maybe it's just his nose. Okay.
So my grandpa basically, like, my grandpa was the epitome of doing, of action, of creating, of like, his thing was the human body and understanding it so well that he could be guided to create anything. And it was all about the being educated and the learning. He was an inventor. He had this beautiful, incredible, massive mind. And, you know, like, he wasn't perfect at all. And there's things that were always like a struggle with him. But at the end of the day, he would do. He would go. He would alchemize information into action. And then my grandma, who's still with us and will be, I believe, for probably another decade, hopefully. She has, my whole life, she had this table full of crystals. Yeah. She collects crystals. She gave me this one as I was going through my divorce. And it has a window in it. And she just spoke to, you know, like, this helps you dream. This helps you look into the future. This helps you to get a sensation of like what you want and where you're going. And so to me, like, these are just two objects that represent what I've come to believe about the feminine and masculine, which is the idea, the dreaming, the seeing, the articulation of seeing, and then the masculine energy of doing. It's like a swing. It's like, to me, it's not even necessarily like women only dream and men only. No. I think that personally, like, I'm here in part to learn about these two energies and to balance them and to be somebody who can swing, you know, and it's like, let's dream and let's go. And let's dream and let's go. And intuition, coming back to intuition, I think has guided me in knowing where I am in that swing.
Yes.
And accepting where I am in that swing and surrendering to the swing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's like, I love that word, alchemize, whenever an idea comes to you, that is that little yearning in your heart's like requesting growth from that seed of an idea. Like, it's just like, this has to grow. This has to grow. This has to grow. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then it's like, now you've got a journey ahead of you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But remembering that even in the act of creation, there is that masculine and feminine stops along the journey. There is that stop of, this is the time to listen and to cultivate where the focus is going to be. This is the time to this is the time to create all the clay so that we can make the sculpture.
Right.
You know?
Let's gather the resources. Yeah.
And they're two different things. And then sometimes you got to step back and look at the sculpture and be like, is this all I want to do? Is this speaking to me still?
Right.
You know, does this still want my attention, or is this ready to live on its own?
Right.
You know, and I mean, obviously I'm saying sculpture, but could be anything artistic, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so that dance, that Shiva Shakti dance of creation, you know, action and then receive the messages, put into action, receive the messages, put into action.
And so it's interesting because like receiving requires so much. Like what I love about the swing for me in my body and in my heart and in my soul and even in my brain of the swing between feminine and masculine is that it's been hard for me to relinquish the masculine because
to let go. Yeah.
To let go of the masculine, and it's also
time to listen.
Yeah, and it's also been hard for me to like accept the masculine too, because ever since that change of ever since realizing that like my appearance was hurting people, or at least that was my perception, is that my appearance was challenging people beyond the point of comfort in a way that hurt them, especially my family, that shift, I was like, okay, I'm a girl. And so then it became really hard to accept that there was a lot of masculine in me. And there's still sometimes, I've gotten better at it now, but there still is kind of this thing of like wanting to be a woman in a way that I've never been able to like fully do, which is like, honestly, it's like the confidence in receiving, like the confidence in like being like, here I am, come here. If you want, And like, I remember in grad school, it was a theme from my professors for me. They were like, Camilla, like I was always here in scenes. I was always,
I'm ready.
And that's a strength that I have, right? Like I can play characters who are like,
very good at it.
Come on. Like I will like go and I'll do.
You're ready to engage, but like the receiving part is a little like.
It's like having the breath, giving time for the breath, for the inhale, for receiving, like it only amplifies then when you do go into action, because it's no longer action out of like conditioning or just like what I can do, like what is familiar. It's actually that transformation. It's actually the fear of receiving, the fear of, well, if I go into receiving, what if nothing comes? Yes. I think that is probably actually like the biggest thing that's kept me from my feminine, especially because I'm divorced, and my divorce had to do with all that. So like, there's so much fear in like, if I sit back, if I don't assert, if I don't fight for what I want, if I don't take, then will I ever receive? And there's the thing of like, well, that's when it becomes unbalanced. And that's when it's like,
Well, I feel like that's a reflection of the state of the world right now, just in general, that it's been such a masculine, I almost feel like we're without getting too political, but I feel like we're at the threshold of You know how when something is out of balance and like you're fighting to, but you don't want to change. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so you just keep pushing the direction you're going, like harder. You push it harder because, like, if I push harder, maybe the balance will come back, which never works. You know?
Right. Yeah.
So it's almost like it's like the neon light version of whatever it was before. You know?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it feels like we have been, especially like speaking to women who are very aware of their masculine energy.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, I fucking love it. It got me in a lot of fucking trouble when I was a kid, you know? But I wouldn't change it for anything. Mm-hmm. You know, it shows you your power that, or perceived power. Let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. How the world perceives power. Mm-hmm. Meaning, like, it made sense in the world that we grew up in the world we live in. We grew up at different times, but but the bodies in which we found ourselves, it didn't make sense.
Right.
Right. But the world itself right now, so it's been a very masculine driven mentality, you know, very, very kind of imbalanced. And it feels like right now is that thing that it's like we're all going further towards the masculine in order to just jump it in there, you know, so maybe we can get more balance. But that's like the complete opposite way.
It totally is. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And so I sense, and I think my grandma said that she senses that there's like a shift and transformation happening. In that way of like, you can't go that way forever. Like the swing has to turn, but like,
well, okay. Do you know anything about yugas?
No. What?
Yuga is in yoga, there's a thing called, or yogic philosophy, there's a thing called, you might be Hindu as well, but yuga, Y-U-G-A. Okay. And they are time periods, right? And they have names like Kali Yuga. There's the Golden Age. I think it's Satya Yuga. Anyway, so there's different times, and during the time they're kind of like generational evolution of human energy, human effort, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And so, and I'm just thinking of this now, and if this is incorrect, well, it's incorrect. But there are two different philosophies in which yuga we're in. The Kali Yuga would be going into the Dark Ages. There's two representations of it. One that could be like a bell curve, right? As far as the demonstration of the yugas, being like the Brahma Yuga, the Golden Age or whatever, or Satya Yuga, whatever. It would be like at the top of the bell curve. Or you could look at it like a circle, like it's coming around and back and down. And Kali Yuga goes into whatever I can't think of the names right now. But I do know Kali Yuga is the Dark Ages. So, but as we went into the Dark Ages, right, and there are things that happen with humanity in the Dark Ages and in the Golden Ages. So the idea is, I'm getting very wordy here, yoga was an oral tradition, almost like telepathic tradition, you know, one-on-one guru cool style. And nothing was ever written down about it because that's how people communicated. They communicated telepathically. They communicated at this higher elevated level. Mm-hmm. And so when it went from that golden age, and there was a sense that we were going back down towards the Kali Yuga, right? Where things got more dense and simplified. There was a sage named Patanjali who wrote everything down about yoga in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. And they're written in little aphorisms, so they're like little pills to be unpacked with your guru, right? Mm-hmm. About what the essence of the meanings are in Sanskrit. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up in the masculine feminine conversation is it's my belief, and this is there are two reasons why the philosophy. So I have a philosophy that female, specifically minority females, would be God if there was one that was a physical embodiment, a human embodiment of a God. And the only reason why I say this, well, there's many reasons, but the resistance comes to those who have the most power, right? And who is resisted the most on this earth? Or not resisted, restrained or pressed down, right? The most.
Right.
Would be minorities, A, and then B, females. So those who have the most, there would be no reason to push someone down and to make them small if they weren't already big. They weren't already powerful. There'd be no need, right? So that's my philosophy on that.
Yeah.
But going from, as we went from the golden age towards the Kali Yuga, everything became more masculine. I'm just saying, and this is like, touting the female horn right now. But when you go back to the golden age, where everything is more intuitive, more telepathic, more kind of ethereal, it's more feminine energy. It's receiving. It's just being. Anyway, I just thought of that. That was a long walk.
Good walk. I enjoyed that walk. That was a very cool stroll. No, yeah, it makes me curious about what actual balance looks like. When the masculine is, there are men that I know who I feel are so balanced, and they're actually pretty feminine men, right? They usually,
the most are.
Yeah, they have access to their femininity, which I guess just means that they receive. Yeah. And they sit back a little bit and they listen and they receive, and they're in wonderful, great access to actual love.
Yes.
In their listening. And
and they're also courageous, and they also protect, and they also drive and have action.
Right.
Yeah. When I teach yoga, and because there are a lot of balancing poses in yoga, and so I ask the question, I'll ask you, is balance static or kinetic?
That's such a good question. Wow. Balance.
Is it stagnant or static, or is it kinetic? Does it have movement?
Yeah. I'm caught in that because the word suspension comes to mind. Where it's you throw something and at the top, there's that moment of suspension and it's balanced. So it's almost like I want to be cheeky and be like, oh, it's kind of in the middle, but I don't know. At the same time,
in a way it is. Yeah, absolutely.
That balance, and maybe balance only happens for a little bit.
It does.
It only comes for a second, and that's enough, and it's all right.
Yeah.
And then we have to remember that at one point there was balance, and we work towards it again.
Well, so the example I always, have you ever gone surfing or paddleboarding?
A little bit.
Or been on anything where even just stood in the middle of a teeter-totter?
Yeah, or I used to be on Indo boards, you know what those are?
Yeah.
Or
balance board, even just, But in order to keep the balance board balanced, it's tiny little movements, constant.
Teeny, yeah. Same thing with I'm into rock climbing, and there are sometimes you're up super tall on this wall, you're up super high, and there's just little movements that you do to help give yourself rest for a second. Just with your thumb, you can rest into something, and that just gives the rest of your body enough time, before you then engage again. But that thumb is super engaged.
Yeah.
Something is engaged. Something's working, in order to give the rest of the body some rest, which is interesting. If we think of, again, thinking of, there's my nutritionist who I think that you would love, who actually is now a life coach, who is incredible, who studies, I don't know if you know human design. She's really into human design. So she's deeply into human design, and she's very, the phrase, as as within, so without, as above, so below.
Hermetic principles. Mm-hmm.
Oh, see, yeah.
It's just Megistus.
Heck yeah, look at you.
Thoth. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know this, but I love that phrase. And it's like stayed with me as a way of like, as even these reflections and how we were able to go from what we've experienced to like, wow, look at what's going on in the world. Yeah. And if we're all one body in a way, you know, it is kind of like, oh, and there's another quote. James Baldwin said something like, the world is held together by the love of very few people. And it's almost like, it's a really interesting quote. And it makes me think of that metaphor. Like if I think about climbing and reaching a really difficult spot and my thumb is the thing that saves me for 5 seconds to rest. It's like, it's like all of that. It's like with what's going on right now, it's kind of like who of this body is the thumb full of love. That's like putting out all that energy to create some kind of balance for the rest. Because so maybe there is like, it's like, even in the suspension, I don't know, I guess as I'm talking with you about this, I'm kind of like, man, like maybe something's got to give, and somebody out there or some of us or whatever that whose job is it to figure out what they know that they need to do to allow for some sense of balance for everybody in order for things to continue, you know. It's an interesting.
I did a podcast not too long ago, or maybe it was, I don't know if it was a podcast or and I remember, it doesn't matter. But I was talking about how in terms of energy, right? Fighting, like how do we fight hate?
Right.
And destruction and seclusion and separation. Fighting it with hate and anger and seclusion and what it's just, it's the same thing. It's the same energy. It's not an opposing energy. The opposing energy is to find connection. The opposing energy is to find love.
It's love.
And acceptance.
It's love. Yeah.
It's love, man. It all comes back to love. What are you working on right now as an artist, my love?
Ooh, a few things. So, number one, as a photographer, I am making a shift towards really serving actors, and trying to merge the world of this headshot is a tool that gets you into, you know, the room, you know, kind of thing, with this headshot is your signature. And let's take those two things and let's find an image that does both of that for you. Because what I'm hearing more and more in the industry is that people want more of their actual voice. And what I'm hearing is that people need to hear your actual voice in order to get you in the room.
That's right.
You know? And
without
so
a label, you need to hear your voice.
I'm fascinated with working with actors in a session and facilitating sessions that arrive at that place. So that's what I'm working on professionally, career-wise, and just generally trying to figure out how to run a freaking business. And like, I'm learning more. I know, right? Nobody knows.
The same thing. Just figure it out. You figure it out as you go.
My intuition is starting.
What's your website if people are looking for you? You're in Chicago, right?
I'm in Chicago, but I do travel. My website is camfrontain.com.
Sweet.
CAMFRONTAIN.com.
We'll put it in the show notes as well.
Great. Perfect.
Thank you so much for chatting with me today. This is fun. I feel like we solved a lot of the world's problems today. Yay us. Yeah.
Good job. All in a day's work.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on and for facilitating a really cool conversation. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this is awesome.